This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Latirzo, former fighter, part-time writer, full-time observer, joined by co-host Jack Hirsch, former 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America. Jack, we don't have a whole lot of great stuff tonight, but we do have a lot of things to talk about. As you know, I'm bummed out. This is a bad time of the year for me when Philadelphia teams are good, as we were in this situation last year. The trifecta of a Phillies World Series, an Ohio State championship, and an Eagles Super Bowl championship all loom large, and it's keeping me up at night. Nice to see you. How are you?
Good, Frank, and it's good of you to be upfront with the viewers, telling them we're not going to have an exciting show today, that we're basically trying to go the distance. We have enough left where we could get a full hour out of this. But
absolutely.
It might not be the most entertaining stuff. Phillies are losing 4-1 in the 5th inning, but listen to our show, because the Phillies technically could afford to lose. It's a game 6. They would have a 7th game if they do lose this one.
Jack, before we jump into the boxing, did you see my post last night about the game?
Oh, well, I see you ramble on a lot. You're talking about the Dolphins, Frank?
Yes.
Yeah,
did you see my post about how I met Larry Zonka?
I know, right. That was a really nice post, the way you went over to him and you told Larry Zonka, you asked him, could he beat Smoking Joe Frazier? That's why athletes don't like fans. They get bombarded with nonsense. You go to
I was 10 years old
in NFL history and ask them, do you think you could beat Smoking Joe Frazier? This is when Frazier was heavyweight champ.
He was coming off the Ellis fight. Jack, I was 10 years old.
Well, that's why he had patience with you, I guess, Frank.
He was very nice about it.
Yeah. Good.
And so that is the story, though. That's how I became a Dolphins fan. And back then, the Eagles were terrible. And then a couple years later, the Dolphins go undefeated. And I got all wrapped up in that, and I've been a Dolphins fan since. And for the last 20 years, it's hurt. It's not fun.
No, well, listen, Philly's a great fight town, so you could look at it that way, and you're from Philly, so...
I like the Philly fighters, Jack, and let's get this off the table. You're a Jets fan, so you suffer as much as me.
Well, not anymore. I mean, we're in a good place now, as you with the Dolphins in a good place. It's boxing in a good place with what's going on this weekend, Frank, because the big talk, I guess you wanted to start off with what you hate to talk about, Tyson Fury against Francis Ngannou this weekend. And let me ask you a question, Frank. And I know you're going to lie to me. Are you buying the pay-per-view? Are you purchasing the pay-per-view? You always say that, Frank. And I think you're being honest when you say it. I can't say you lie. You don't lie, Frank.
Not, Jack.
I think you really mean it when you say no. But then I think you get overwhelmed by the temptation come fight night, okay?
Not this time, Jack. Not this time. And the reason is I am tired of Tyson Fury's act. I don't even know how to handicap this thing. It's not on his record. It's not going to count on his record. It's a 10-round exhibition. I don't know if they have some kind of an agreement made, because Francis Ngannou is going to make $10 million. That's more than he's made in his entire career as a former UFC heavyweight champ. So I don't know where to go with this, but between all the great games, the college great games that are on Saturday night, and the game, and the fact that I had a Saturday taken away from me yesterday because of a wedding, I'm going to be pinned to the TV watching college football, and I will check the internet to get a highlight to see what happened, Jack, but I have no interest in this at all, to be honest. Only thing I will say is this. I do worry because I never know what kind of shape Tyson Fury's in. Nagahu's a big guy. He's supposed to be a tremendous puncher. Now, being a tremendous puncher in the octagon is not the same as being a tremendous puncher in the ring. But this guy's first love was boxing. So I have an inkling he knows how to throw a punch. But if it's legit, Jack, he shouldn't be able to win a minute. But I will make a prediction. I say this goes 10 rounds. Nobody gets hurt.
You know, it's not supposed to be an exhibition. It's supposed to be a real fight, boxing rules. If it was a complete exhibition, maybe it would get pre-staged. It would be called entertainment or this or that to avoid legal liability. I'm going to tell you this about Tyson Fury. When people call him one of the greatest heavyweight champions of all time, I disagree only based on accomplishments. I feel he has to do more. But if you ignore the accomplishment factor and look at his size, his mobility, his boxing ability, the full package, you can make an argument that he is one of the greatest heavyweight champions of all time. In the sense, if we had a tournament of the 8 greatest heavyweights of all time going against one another and put him as one of the 8, he'd have actually a shot at winning the tournament. It's not.
He's a tough matchup, Jack.
It's a tough matchup for anyone because of his size, and we've never seen a big man his size with that type of mobility. But he does have a little glass in his jaw at times, a little bit. I'm not saying a lot. I was at the Felt Forum, Madison Square Gardens, Felt Forum, now called the Paramount. It may have been called the Paramount Theater at the time. I forgot. When he fought Stevie Cunningham, a cruiserweight basically, and Cunningham knocked Fury flat on his back. And the only reason Cunningham didn't win that fight is because he was a much smaller guy and Fury kept lying on him and his physicality got him through. That was 10 years ago, granted. And you might say, well, no disgrace getting hurt badly by Deontay Wilder a couple of times and coming close to getting stopped a couple of times, especially the first fight, 1 second away from defeat. And the one thing Ngannou could do, he might be able to do as well as Wilder is punch. He might. Okay, we can't say we don't know.
We just don't know.
As a mixed martial artist, he has a tremendous punch. And he doesn't have to be able to win a second of any match. It reminded me of what Cus D'Amato said to Wilt Chamberlain when there was talk of Chamberlain fighting Muhammad Ali. Cus D'Amato offered to train Chamberlain, and he said, "We don't have to teach you how to box. We only
one guy you got to fight."
Exactly, Frank. How to fight one man. And the strategy I heard later was for Chamberlain to just keep away from Ali. Tall, rangy, just keep throwing jabs and hope Ali moves in and he can lash out with a hard blow. Now, the chances of that happening were non-existent. Chamberlain, I wouldn't have even given him an iota of a chance because he wasn't a fighter. He was a basketball player. But Ngannou's a fighter. He's a real fighter. He's not a boxer. He knows how to deliver a big punch, and it's possible he catches Fury, who's a big target. Now, Fury's not going to lose any minute of the fight, any half minute of the fight if he doesn't want to, okay? But he could get hit with a big punch. And let's say that happened, Frank. We could say we don't care who wins. What happens to the heavyweight championship of the world?
I think it becomes a farce. And I think boxing loses a lot of credibility because punching in the octagon and the delivery is not the same as punching in the ring. In the octagon, those guys are locked up and exchanging. In the ring, a good boxer can keep his distance, keep moving. You can't really rush him and do some crazy things in the ring that you can in the octagon. So I just don't see, if it's on the up and up, how Ngannou, even though he can punch, I just don't see how he can win. My question is, how serious did Fury take it? What kind of shape will he really be in? And where will his head be? Will he really try to put forth an effort like he would if he was fighting Usyk and Wilder? And touching on his chin, you don't think he has much of a chin, Jack, but you know what? They said that about Ali when Cooper dropped him. And it turned out Ali had a great chin. Now, I'm going to answer the argument. And the fact is, Ali was only 21 then. He hadn't filled out. And he wasn't Muhammad Ali then. He wasn't a full-fledged man he would be 6 years later. But, Fury has that resiliency like Larry Holmes. We saw Larry Holmes drop, Jack, and get up and come back. Would you say Larry Holmes don't have a good chin?
There's a little bit of a difference. And over the hill, Muhammad Ali, when he was at the end of his career, had little left, was able to absorb the best punches from Ernie Shavers. They hurt him, but he stayed on his feet.
Never went down.
Quickly. If Tyson Fury got hit with the same shots that Shavers landed on Ali, there's a very good chance Fury goes down and he's hurt. That's what I mean by that. No, he doesn't have a soft chin, Fury. He can take an adequate punch. How does that sound? Okay, he has an adequate chin, but he doesn't have the type of chin where you're going to figure if you nail him, he's going to be able to, chances are he's going to be able to shake it off.
Well, to this point in his career, Jack, that's been the case. But think about this. Wasn't Steve Cunningham about 212 when he fought Tyson Fury?
Yeah, Fury outweighed him by about 50
But I'm saying Steve Cunningham was a 212-pound guy. Ernie Shavers was 211 when he hit Ali. Okay, so it's like they're kind of the same size there. So in my opinion, if you're over 200 pounds, you hit hard enough to knock anybody out. Cunningham caught him with a shot.
Listen, Fury should win very easily. Let me be upfront, because I know your friends are going to be calling you up saying Jack has no idea what he's talking about, predicting Fury gets knocked out.
I got no mail this week, Jack. But it was only 30.
The Fury should win very easily, unless an accident happens. Okay, accident. But let's say that accident happens. Ngannou lashes out with a punch. Let's pretend for one moment he does the unthinkable and he knocks Fury out. It is going to be a real fight. I don't care how they're labeling it. Both guys are going to try their very best from all measures. It's not listed on BoxRec, and maybe they're not listing it because the WBC is thinking the same way I am. If Fury loses, we can't recognize Ngannou as being champion. But what happens if Fury does get knocked out? I mean, and for those who consider him the lineal champion, by all rights, wouldn't he be losing that? And you might say, well, it shouldn't be allowed a guy who's having his debut do that to him. But Pete Rademacher fought for the heavyweight title against Floyd Patterson in his debut, and had he won, he would be heavyweight champion. In fact, he knocked Patterson down once, but a number of guys knocked Patterson down. We agree he didn't have the best chin.
If Ngannou knocks him out, Jack, it's a disgrace for boxing. Fury's a disgrace, and that will be, I hate to say one of the biggest black eyes, but it'll be a very big black eye. If a guy who has had 30 fights as a pro, who's never lost, he beat Klitschko and he beat Wilder, and he gets this guy, this mixed martial artist who's never fought 10 rounds, gets in there in his first fight, and he can land and knock this guy out. I think it makes boxing look like a second-tier sport.
No, it wouldn't do it. Let me tell you how boxing saves face. Ngannou has Mike Tyson in his corner teaching him. All he has to say after the fight, oh, Mike taught me this. And these fans, some of them will go crazy like Tyson is back. Tyson showed him how to do it. So boxing would actually save face. But the heavyweight title, Frank, for those, you can't have it both ways. For those who consider Fury the lineal champion,
you're right.
He needs to get knocked out. How on earth do you consider Ngannou the lineal heavyweight champion? In reality, he would be. I had a hard time doing this, Frank, and I might be at fault. I have to admit. I thought George Foreman beat Shannon Briggs 8 rounds to 4.
I was at that fight. I thought that, Jack, and everybody around me thought it.
Right. So Briggs gets the decision, meaning the judges had to be 3 rounds off from what I did, at least, to give it to him. But the point is, can you look in the mirror and think to yourself, oh, Briggs is the lineal heavyweight champion? You kind of wince. Technically, he was, but I just can't look at him as such because it was a really bad decision, I thought.
No, he did not win that fight. And then, Foreman retired after that. We never saw him after that. But yeah. Briggs was a legit fighter, Jack, at least a legit boxer. The guy who's not. And I don't like this. I love this sport of boxing. I don't want to see it tarnished. I do think this could be a big black eye. But if I try to clear my head of that fear and I think about, okay, look, being a big muscle bound guy like Nagahu, knocking guys out in the UFC, it's just not the same because we saw Conor McGregor, who's one of the best punchers ever. He couldn't do anything in a ring.
He couldn't Chavez couldn't. Boxing wise, he had no power. Conor McGregor's a boxer. Conor McGregor didn't look like a puncher at all when he had the gloves on.
But Jack, in the octagon, he was a killer. He knocked a lot of guys out with one punch, and that's my point. And he was so much bigger than Mayweather, and he really never even tickled him. And we know Floyd wasn't in good shape. And then we see Anderson Silva, who was probably one of the better boxers in MMA. He couldn't do nothing with Jake Paul. Jake Paul's a five fight guy. So Fury has a lot riding, Jack, and it'll be humiliating if he gets beat. And then think of all the money. I mean, does anybody want to see Nagahu fight Usyk? I guess if he could stretch Fury with one punch, maybe, but I don't.
That would actually make the fight, and something we'll talk about later, highlight reels. That's what sells fights, basically. And they would show Nagano knocking Fury out. And could you imagine that?
Jack, if that happened, and we're talking about this like we think it can. Neither one of us thinks that it will, but it's just something to ponder. But if that happened, everything that Tyson Fury has built in his career and his stock and trade about being undefeated and how he could beat anybody from any era, that goes out the window. And it could be the most humiliating. Here's something to think about. If that happened, would that be the most humiliating loss by any upper tier fighter? I think it would be.
It would be, but Fury, this is my impression only. I don't know what he's really thinking inside. He's not as much of a legacy guy to his own way of thinking as, let's say, Floyd Mayweather. At this point, to Floyd Mayweather Jr., it's all about legacy. He can talk all he wants about money, but he doesn't want to risk his unbeaten record. That's why he fights these exhibition fights, but he wouldn't put it on the line for real. And, there's been some talk going on, maybe Mayweather and Pacquiao again, but Floyd would be sure it was an exhibition. It wouldn't be going on the record, just in case something went wrong and he should lose that fight. If it was real against Pacquiao. But they probably wouldn't have judges. They would go at it. And the Mayweather-Pacquiao brand, the names are so magical. People would tune in even knowing it's an exhibition, that they're not.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right.
At the end. And Pacquiao's the type of competitor, I can't see him just playing along with Floyd. He would want to get the better of it, and Floyd wouldn't want to get the better of it. Floyd might be okay, even Steven, with just entertaining and giving the fans something. As long as he doesn't outdo me, Floyd might be okay with it. But I got to believe Pacquiao would have a little bit of a score to settle.
I agree with that, Jack. And what I can't believe is that we're actually talking about this.
Well,
because
Floyd is
it's not out of the realm, and it's just a shame. It's another thing that hurts the sport, and only a few guys are making money, and that's all Tyson Fury cares about. He says he's going to fight 10 more times. I don't believe that. Now he said that Usyk has to fight him in December, when Usyk has come out and said he wants 3 months. There's no way Fury and Usyk fight this year, if they even fight.
Well, that's Fury's excuse. So as Usyk wants a full training camp for the fight, okay, where they signed and a firm date. If Fury's just talking, you want to know something? If Usyk was going to fight in December, hypothetically, I'm not so sure Fury would go ahead with it, because maybe after Nagano, he might want to take a break again. Or then again, maybe Fury's thinking, look, I'll punish myself for a couple of more months, go right straight to the Usyk fight. I'm already in some form of physical condition. So we'll see. But
Jack, staying in the heavyweight division, you see that Anthony Joshua has changed trainers again, and he might be going with Ben Davidson, and he's left.
Left Derek James. It looks like
Derek James. He left him, and now he's got what's this? His fourth trainer.
Look, he's entire. Yeah. He had Derek James before him, Robert Garcia.
Shane McGuigan.
No, he didn't have Shane McGuigan. I think he had Joe Gallagher before. David Hay had Shane McGuigan. But listen, Anthony Joshua's entitled to change trainers as much as he wants, basically, as long as he doesn't blame them. He's got to get a comfortable fit. And sometimes you need a full training camp with a guy to see whether he's the right guy for you going forward.
Jack, he's 34 years old. He's had X amount of title fights, and he's still looking for a trainer. That's just a bad sign to me. That's just a bad sign. Joe, I think you may be right about the payday.
Frank, how many fighters, elite fighters, okay? Let's call Joshua an elite fighter because he's made elite money, okay? Elite money makes you
He's elite today.
Elite fighter. Okay. How many elite fighters have gone their whole career with one trainer without making a switch? And I'm going to tell you, I may have mentioned this in the past show. I was reading a book by Ricky Hatton back in 2010 or so. It was an old book, and he in the book said he's never going to blame his trainer, Billy Graham, if he loses a fight. He's never going to leave Billy no matter what. It wouldn't be his trainer's fault. He's not like other fighters blaming his trainer. Well, guess what? He loses to Floyd Mayweather Jr., and he moves on to Floyd Mayweather Sr. So, you don't know what these
But Jack,
guys,
this is the fourth time for Joshua. He hasn't even had 30 fights. 4 trainers? There's something wrong. If you have to change that many times, I don't know what's going on, but I think there's a big problem.
Let me explain. No, I wouldn't necessarily mean that. Ben Davidson is located in the UK, where Joshua's from. Derek James is located in Texas. He went to Texas. He trained there a long time. He wants to train at home in the UK. Sometimes it's logistics. If Derek James said, I'm going to move to the UK and I'm going to live here full time to train you, and Derek James has other fighters. He has the Charlo brothers. He had Errol Spence. Spence moved on from him. And it didn't, it just didn't quite work. I mean, with Derek James, not that it was bad, but
Jack, Derek James lived in Texas and was from out in Texas when Joshua did that. So he had to know about the logistics. I think there's more than that. I think Anthony Joshua, I like the idea that he tries to fight and he stays active, but I really do think he is a very damaged fighter, and I think he's trying to find that one guy that could say that one thing to him to make him think that whatever demons he has and harbors inside shouldn't be there, and the guy can exercise them, basically perform like a mental exorcism and get rid of them. I just think that's what he's looking for. I don't think it's a good sign. And as you said, you need a camp or two. How many times? Well, if you keep starting over, you keep needing new camps. Mike Tyson had a bunch of trainers, Jack, but how many of them really taught him anything? He already knew how to fight. What he needed was somebody to not be a yes man and to keep him in line, which was very hard to do. Anthony Joshua is who he is. Nobody's going to reconstruct him and make him a different fighter. It's all up here.
A trainer can take a fighter up a little level, and a little level might make a major difference. Don't get me wrong. We talked about this in the past. Emmanuel Stewart, what he did for Lennox Lewis and Vladimir Klitschko, they were already heavyweight title holders, but he made them a little better.
He gave them that 5 or 10% that they didn't have, and it made all the difference in the world.
Or what Angelo Dundee did with Jimmy Ellis, a career middleweight, the way he maneuvered him and helped them. But, you know, Dundee, Muhammad Ali would have been every bit as successful without Angelo Dundee. You know, it didn't mean much. Yank Durham, the way he developed Smoking Joe Frazier. But when you get to a certain point, you kind of wonder what difference is a trainer going to make in most cases. And in Joshua's case, I don't think there's anyone out there who could make him realistically much better, be a difference maker. You know who he'd need? A guy like a Customato, a guy to really work on his head.
Work on his mind.
On his mind, and maybe toughen him up in certain ways, get him thinking a certain way. That's what he might need a lot more than the technical stuff.
I agree with that. I think, I said earlier, I think that's what he needs. I think he has demons that he has to exercise, and I think he wants a trainer to do it, and it's not going to happen, Jack. Once you get to that point, very seldom do guys come back from that. That's why I've always said the way that Tommy Morrison was knocked out by Ray Mercer and John Ruiz by David Tua, and yet both of those guys came back and won big fights, never feared getting into exchanges, and you could just tell it never affected them. Like Marquez knocking Pacquiao. Pacquiao came back and was the same guy. Other guys, Roy Jones wasn't quite the same after Tarver and Glenn Johnson. Joshua was not the same. And even Lennox Lewis, people forget, when he was stopped by McCall, he had about a 3-year period between 94 and 97 where he didn't look that good until he got with Manuel Stewart.
You know, it's funny. I talked with Emmanuel Stewart about that when he was training Lennox Lewis towards, you know, the end of Lewis's career. And Stewart tried to say the right thing. He was always honest with me, and he spoke with me on the side, but I could tell he could sense, I knew he was fibbing to me a little bit. He was McCall's trainer who led him to the victory over Lewis. And I said, do you think the referee should have stopped the fight? He goes, I think he should have allowed it to continue. He was saying it with less than conviction. I say, do you think Lennox would have then come on and beat your guy Oliver McCall? And he says, I think so. But he said it so weakly, as if to say, what am I supposed to tell you, Jack? You know, Lennox.
I don't think that fight would stop too soon, and there's no way Lewis was going to come back and win that fight.
I didn't think he was, but I thought there was a certain loyalty he was trying to show quietly on the side, you know.
You know, Jack, he would actually be a good guy for Joshua, though.
He'd be a great guy for Joshua.
Because guys that have big right hands, that are tall, that hide behind their jab and set it up, he was a master at teaching them, as you've heard me say before, kind of fighting without fighting and protecting their chin or whatever damage they had from the neck up. He would have been great for Joshua, but, you know, he's not around to do that, so that's not going to happen. What else you have, Jack? You want to talk about what else?
Yeah, I want to talk about Jack Catterall appointing Jorge Linares. At the end of the fight, Linares announced his retirement. And retirements in boxing can be a dime a dozen, Frank. We know guys keep coming back, even if it's for 1 fight 5 years later. You get the feeling Linares is going to stay retired now. I mean, there's nowhere to go. I mean, I can't imagine him later on thinking, oh, I'm going to get in shape and do this and that. Because he said after the fight, he's very happy. He was in excellent shape for Catterall, you know? And this is the way he's happy to go out this way, you know, losing a decision to a great fighter like Catterall. He was being diplomatic. I'm not saying Catterall's a great fighter. Maybe at some point he'll prove to be, but that's a long way off if he can ever prove that.
Hey, Jack, he lost 5 of his last 7 fights. Right. He was stopped in 2 of them. But you know what? I think it might be a little late, but maybe a fight or 2. But I think he's getting out at the right time. He seems like he has all his faculties. I hope he has some money put away. I think he had not a Hall of Fame career, but an outstanding career. And at one time, through his first 27 fights when he was undefeated, I really thought he was an exceptional boxer with a beautiful left hand, had good sense of distance and timing. And, you know, in the big spots, sometimes he got caught or cut. But it's well done. Well done career the way he managed himself.
Well, I'm going to tell you, Frank, I don't want to say a little disappointing because he fought very honorably his whole career. And I was in the Barclays Center when he gave it all against the great Vasily Lomachenko. When Lomachenko was at his absolute prime, at his best, and he knocked Lomachenko down, and Lomachenko was skidding on the canvas. It was such a beautiful knockdown of Lomachenko in that fight. But we were talking about Emanuel Steward a moment ago, and Emanuel Steward said about Linares early in his career, he's like the most perfect fighter he's ever seen. The way he,
I thought he was beautiful, Jack. I didn't know he said that. I thought he was
a technician. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that. Something about how he moved and he boxed and everything about him. I never saw it, but when Emanuel Steward, knew a lot more about boxing than I, ever knew or would know.
He was Jack. He was really great, nice jab, smooth. A little bit of Napoli's, I thought, only with more of a jab. Could put his punches together, perfect timing and distance. He knew what punch to throw and when to throw it, but he could be vulnerable to get caught with the big shot. But yeah, for his first 27, 28 fights, Jack, I loved him and thought he was a beautiful boxer.
But you said it best a moment ago. Not quite a Hall of Fame career. And considering his potential, he was like one of these ball players. You're saying he's going to be an all-time great. He's going to be this and this. And all he did was have a good career, a nice, good, solid career. And it's, somehow with Linares, more was expected in that sense. I also saw him get knocked out in the round by Pablo Cano. After
that was his first loss, I believe.
Yeah,
the first round.
No, he's first round, exactly. So he could be kind of erratic. He had success against fighters from the UK before Catterall. But I think when the fight was over, everyone wanted to give Linares his due, his respect, the way we're kind of trying to give here, because he had a very honorable career. That's how I would sum it up.
Jack, think about this, though. Career. You sound like you're disappointed that he's not a Hall of Famer, but guess what? That's why there's a Hall of Famer, and that's why those guys are that special. And to me, he's an example of a guy who doesn't quite make it, but outstanding career, outstanding fighter. But again, in the biggest spots, he came up a little short. And to me, that's the difference between winning, going in and not. Like, I don't think Ken Norton's a Hall of Famer, Jack, because to me, in his biggest fights, he didn't quite get it done. And we can talk about the decisions, but the bottom line is Larry Holmes and Ali were there to get beat, and he left food on the table. So to me, he's not a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but it's sometimes such a thin line. I mentioned the Lomachenko fight a moment ago. Imagine he finished Lomachenko off after he knocked him down.
Changed the whole perception of his career.
That puts him in the Hall of Fame, basically. We go, wow, he knocked out Vasily Lomachenko in his prime. Then they'd have a rematch. Lomachenko would win the rematch, but the idea that he would have knocked him out. But the story of that fight afterwards is Jack Catterall. And Eddie Hearn, Catterall's promoter, saying, well, if he can't get a title match, because the first priority is to win a world title, Josh Taylor's absolutely the fight to be made. And everyone wants to see Catterall and Taylor. Now, the feeling is, from the vast majority when they last fought, that Catterall was robbed. You and I both scored it for Catterall. You actually scored it for a close fight, 1 point for Catterall. I had Catterall winning by 3 points. But
I think I had 2.
You had the 2. I thought it was 1. Well, there's a knockdown in the fight, so I think you had it a 1 point thing.
I forget. I just know I had Catterall winning very close.
I recall you telling me 1 point.
Okay.
You had it 6 rounds apiece, and with Catterall scoring the knockdown, that gave him the edge. I had it.
I think you know what, Jack? I think you're right. So I had a little closer than you. Maybe I had Andre Ward eyes that night, but I had a little closer.
That's okay. You probably were missing the stab jabs Catterall was throwing in one of the rounds,
and I didn't give Catterall credit for the hop pivot.
Yeah, that pivot. But but the vast majority of viewers seem to have it an 8-4 fight. They had it a little wider than us, and with the extra point and the knockdown, that's 5 points.
Yep.
But in any event, whether you think it was close, whether it was decisive, it was hard to find anyone who actually thought, Taylor won the fight.
Only Andre Ward.
Yeah, okay. Listen, it's not beyond comprehension to think that Taylor won the fight. It's not ridiculous, and we just don't think he did it. But the point is, it was one of the more controversial decisions, to the point where my publication, Boxing News, they came out with their yearly awards, and they disregarded the decision and named Jack Catterall the British Fighter of the Year, despite the loss. So that's kind of an oddity. But a rematch between the two would be big. Now, it could have already taken place, but Josh Taylor elected to fight Teofimo Lopez. I guess he thought maybe it could pay him a little more, and I can't see how it paid him more, because a fight with Jack Catterall in the UK, that's huge. They could put that in a stadium at this point, I think.
Jack, when there was talk of the rematch with Taylor and Catterall, I was pretty conclusive that I thought that Taylor would win. I thought he would be more prepared strategically, mentally, and I just didn't think that Catterall could hit that high note again. But since then, Taylor's only had the one fight against Lopez, and after watching that fight, I like Catterall's chances a lot better, because I realized I may have been off, and it wasn't so much that Taylor just had an off night, that he may be the new Robin Blake, and I think he may be on the decline. And if you add that in with a guy that has a style that's tough for him, now I think it would favor Catterall if they fought again. And again, too, Taylor has trouble making 140. I don't know what he has left at 140, Jack.
Catch weight now, maybe a catch weight. So there would be no titles on the line, anything, and it could sell on the names, but it's one of the intriguing fights, because it seems a little bit of a grudge fight. After the fight, Taylor came off looking like a complete fool after they last fought. He's interviewed in the ring, and he says about Catterall, he knows he lost the fight. The moment Josh Taylor said that, I'm thinking this guy is a bumbling idiot, a complete moron.
It didn't come off good.
He came, and then he kept talking boldly. I beat him. And then he couldn't find support anywhere, unless you're mentioning Andre Ward. Everywhere he turned, everyone was saying Catterall won. So now Taylor's changing his tune, saying, well, it could have gone either way, which is hypothetically correct, meaning, well, he could have gotten the decision as well. But
Jack, if you think about Taylor, though, he's in a tough spot, because if he's not going to retire, the only fight for him really that anybody has a lot of interest in, especially with Prograis being tied up, would be against Catterall. Okay, well, we saw that was tough the last time out. And I just think if Taylor goes up to 147, I don't see him being a factor with those guys. I just think they're too strong for him, and I just think that they would bully him.
If he can make 140, I got a great fight for Josh Taylor. I mean, if he beats Catterall, he could completely revive his career. If Regis Prograis upsets Devin Haney, a rematch between Prograis and Josh Taylor. Okay, they had a great fight before. You have him come back.
That was also very close.
Right, Prograis would want to fight. But, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. There's another fight this weekend on Friday night that slipped under the radar. Mando Serrano's fighting Daniela Ramos. Forget Daniela Ramos. Amanda Serrano's the big attraction. But what makes this fight noteworthy, it's the first time in a couple of decades or something since women's boxing was in the dark ages. They are going to be fighting a 12-rounder, 3-minute rounds, just like the men.
I love it.
But I don't, Frank. Right now, women's boxing is 2 10-minute rounds, okay? No, 10 2-minute rounds.
10 2-minute rounds, right. I know what you
I
meant.
would love that 2 10-minute rounds, Frank. Let them keep going at it like a marathon.
We'd see knockouts then.
Yeah, but so there's an actual 20 minutes of fighting. And the women produce more action-packed fights than men, in large part because it's of a shorter duration. If the men had 2-minute rounds instead of 3-minute rounds, and there were 10 rounds,
They'd be more action-packed.
It would be more action-packed. My concern is this. I can't see the women going all out with an additional 16 minutes left. It's going to take away a little bit of the entertainment factor, which makes women boxing so appealing.
Jack, I can see your point, but I still like it because now it requires a little more strategy, a little more thinking, and just like in the men's division, I think the 15 and the 12, the 15 separates the men from the boys. I think this will separate the girls from the women. I like it. I guarantee you, Jack, we won't see the back and forth action that we're used to seeing, but we'll see more stoppages, and we'll see these girls having to think and plot their strategy and having some kind of a game plan going in, where before it's not the sprint now that it was. And let me just say this. I don't know how many female boxers that you've been around. You've probably been around a lot.
So
Jack, I was in the gym with them when the sport was in its infancy. When I lived outside of Atlantic City, when I was married in the late 90s, early 2000s, Kathy Collins, Leah Mellinger. Jack, I watched those girls train, and I'll tell you what, they put as much effort into it as any guy I was ever around, and they want to learn, and they don't want you to take it easy on them. They want you to make it hard, just like it is for the men. So I think that they'll adjust. I don't think it's a bad thing.
Yeah, well, it remains to be seen. We get used to anything. If women start fighting 12 rounds, 3-minute rounds, we'll get used to it.
Jack, do you think if the WNBA used the same size that they use ball as they use in the NBA, and the baskets were the same size, do you think it would hurt the game for the women?
I'm ashamed to say, even though I'm supposed to follow all sports, I don't follow the WNBA as much as I maybe should. I didn't know.
Okay, the ball's not as big.
Yeah.
And I think the net is a little bit shorter or lower. So I don't know, Jack. When women's track run against the same clock and the same distance as the men, so I have no problem with it.
Okay. So, well, it remains to be seen, but it takes off Friday night. Amanda Serrano's in the forefront, of all of it. And it's an equal rights thing, and I'm all for women getting equal rights in all walks of life. But maybe they have it a little better in boxing, doing 10 rounds, 2-minute rounds than the men have. But if they want to enter the same territory as the men, is it going to mean more money to them too? That's an issue, too. But there's a lot to figure out. Okay,
Jack, I have no issue with it. I don't think anybody's going to get hurt because I don't think they can really hurt each other. So I think, in fact, that they might take it more serious. And look, in MMA, women fight under I believe, the same constraints as the men do. So I have no issue with it. As long as a man doesn't show up and says he identifies as a woman and fights a female, I'm good.
Okay. What we started.
Make a pick, Jack.
A pick? About what?
On the fight.
Oh, Serrano should win easy.
Okay.
Is that what? I mean, that's not the competitive. The idea, it's a 12-rounder. It'd be weird. Serrano fought for this, and she's a very good girl. She very classy, very, very classy. The way she conducts herself, I'm a fan. Okay, but can you imagine if the fight goes like 3 or 4 rounds? The whole idea for women's boxing, let this go to full 12 rounds and 3-minute rounds. But if Serrano wins a timid 12-round decision, it doesn't prove anything. They might say, oh, we went the same distance as men. This is historic and all that. But whatever. Let the fight take place. Let's revisit it next week, Frank. Because
all right.
To see how it came off. Last week, we were discussing at the end of the show, things just pop up in our heads out of nowhere. The greatest highlight reel fighters of all time. Now, highlight reels could be looked at it different ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be a knockout, even though that helps an awful lot to make a highlight reel fighter. Sometimes a fighter can look so sensational in how he does things. I'll give you an example. Who's a great highlight reel fighter to watch?
I know you're going to. Go ahead. No, there's a couple, so I'm not sure who you're going to say.
This isn't one of my top 5, but he was a great highlight reel fighter. Prince Nassim Hamed, because he was entertaining in the highlight reels. With all his crazy antics, he was so unorthodox how he threw punches. So you watch that on a highlight, you stop, you look, you entertain, you want to see more of the guy. Okay, but I'm going to tell you who I think was the greatest highlight. I have 5 in a particular order. Should I give you my 5 first?
Yes.
Okay, the greatest highlight reel fighter ever, I think, in boxing history. And I want to be fair to the old timers before we had a lot of film on some of them, like the Sam Langfords, guys like that who don't have a chance to make the list. I'd say the Brown Bomber Joe Louis. So many sensational knockouts. You play the clips of what he's doing, the way he put the punches together, knocking out Walcott in the second fight, the overhand right with Jimmy Braddock, the way guys would fall.
How about the right he hit Schmeling with in the rematch? You can see his whole head look like it was unscrewing from his neck.
Right. You can watch a montage of Joe Louis's knockouts over and over, and he seemed to basically deliver it in every fight. Second place, believe it or not the biggest puncher, Muhammad Ali. The clips of his Cleveland Williams fight, a thing of beauty. It's absolutely beautiful. The left hook that knocked out Bonavina, just Liston going down in the second fight, which I thought was legitimate, by the way. And just the Ali shuffle, that's a highlight reel, the way he shuffled his feet. Third, I would say on my list would be Jack Dempsey. We can watch him knocking Jess Willard down over and over again. You never get tired of that, Frank. Something about that clip, the way he kept knocking Willard to the floor, being knocked out of the ring by Louis Firpo was a highlight. The way he knocked out Jack Sharkey, who complained to the ref one fight. The long count with Gene Tunney, what a great highlight reel. The series of punches he landed. Fourth, I'd say Iron Mike Tyson, just in general, the knockouts. The knockout of Spinks was classic highlight, stuff. And a number of other fights with Tyson would just, the way he threw those punches,
the way especially the guys that weren't quite the second tier guys, he just demolished.
Right. And fifth, I'd say highlight reel only. Sugar Ray Robinson, that short left hook that knocked out Gene Fulmer. I mean, that's the prettiest single punch in boxing history. The way he knocked out Rocky Graziano after Graziano staggered him. It was a flash knockdown. Technically, knockdown. Robinson's knee touched the canvas. He wasn't hurt, but Graziano moved in for the kill. He got
hit with that right hand.
He was emboldened by it being scored a knockdown, and Robinson taunted him, bang, bang, and just, put him out. And just watching Sugar Ray Robinson, he was just a thing of beauty in there. Those are my highlight guys. I'm missing guys. You're probably going to name a couple who I'm missing.
It's funny, Jack. I misunderstood what we were going to do in this segment, so I went with one punch knockout guys.
That's okay, because I changed the rules at the end. I mean,
okay.
I probably led you to believe that, so this is on me for changing.
All right, I'm going to give you one. I'm surprised you left off, but I can see why you did based on the guys you said.
The guys I have, yeah.
Tommy Hearns.
Yeah, Yeah, yeah.
Tommy Hearns had some beautiful sequences with that jab, the right hand, the left hook to the body. I mean, he killed I mean, I don't mean killed, but he really took my buddy James Schuler out. Duran,
The Leonard
Cuevas.
knockdown in the second fight, the second knockdown was classic, the way he turned back, forth, and
how about the one where he dropped Roldan? Everybody forgets about that. Roldan fell forward, and Roldan was actually doing pretty good at that time.
Yeah.
I would also say, yes. I would also, you know who else I would put in there, Jack? I think Matthew Saad Muhammad could be in there too. Some of his knockouts, Jack, and some of his sequences where he was ending the fight, Yaki Lopez, Richie Cates, Marvin Johnson.
Frank, but highlight reels last a matter of seconds, maybe up to 10 seconds max. I'm not.
So if you do one or two punches, it doesn't count?
No. Matthew Saad Muhammad would be on the brink of defeat, but he would come back. But he usually wouldn't knock an opponent out immediately. He would then overwhelm them over the next, let's say, 2 minutes. That's not quite a highlight reel.
Jack, I disagree with you there. I agree with your interpretation, but if you go back and look at Saad's, some of his comebacks, they were one or two punches. Lottie Maui, again, Richie Cates, he turned that fight around with one punch. Johnson, he pretty much put him away once he got hurt. Who else? I mean,
not necessarily a stopping a guy suddenly. It's just how sensational he looks doing it is what.
But the guys you named, I think, were all exciting to watch, and I would put Saad in that category. Just like you knew when Saad fought, Jack, it was going to be exciting. Hearns, win or lose, exciting. So even Sugar Ray Leonard had a couple of those moments too. How about the way he stopped Andy Price? Those punches were like freaking missile.
And Davey
Green was one punch. Andy Price, he had him on the ropes, and he was hitting him so many times, the punches were keeping him up.
Well, it depends what you want. Like if you talk about quick, sudden knockouts, Bob Foster with Dick Tiger, Mike Quarry,
Vincente Rondon.
Right. Is he a highlight? He's a strong highlight reel fighter, but from an entertainment value, if we have to see highlight reels of the great fighters, for some reason, people are intrigued by certain names. They're always intrigued by Ali. The Ali shuffle in itself is as exciting to someone to watch as maybe another fighter delivering a knockout blow.
The Cleveland Williams and Brian London knockouts are no doubt iconic.
Right. The hand speed, against those fighters. Because if it's just hard punching, I could say, well, Julian Jackson, but I don't really look at them quite the highlight fighter. Yeah, it's them.
Let me ask you this, Jack. Let's change this a little bit. What fight? Do you have a collection of fights, or at some point in your life did you? I know as we get older, we don't do it as much.
What do you mean collection of fights?
I mean, like fights that you will put in and watch, or bring up on the computer and watch.
If I'm in the mood of a certain fight, I'm more apt to do, Frank, in this day and age. If I have time, and you don't have as much time, there's so many obligations, I'll watch a fight that I maybe didn't see. Like a couple of years ago, and this was a little before I became a real fan because I was too young at the time. Hurricane Card and Joey Giardello. I never saw the full fight. I know it was.
I think that is on YouTube.
I fought it on YouTube. I watched it on YouTube, the full 15 rounds. I rewatched the Patterson Ellis fight and I rescored it because, as a much older person as opposed to being a kid.
And Ellis does a little better than people remember.
A little better, but I still thought Patterson won. Ellis is like my all-time favorite,
I didn't think Floyd was busy enough.
You know what fight I'm going to want to watch? A buddy of mine, a young man, Sean Nam. he wrote a book talking about Tyrone Everett's murder, but they sent around his fight with Alfredo Escalera that everyone calls a blatant robbery. I don't know, were you at the fight in Philadelphia, Frank? Do you remember how you scored it? I never saw the fight, believe it or not. I'm going to go back to YouTube if it's on there at some point, and I'm going to watch the fight. But everyone I talked to thinks it was a terrible decision. Do you remember how you
Jack,
scored it?
I didn't have a paper and pen. I was like 17 at the time, but I recall I only thought that Escalera won maybe 3 rounds.
Okay.
It was just clear cut. I mean, Everett he just outboxed him at every turn.
Right. That's what I heard, basically from everyone. But a fight like that, I might want to watch. But you said it best, Frank. And I've always thought this. Once you know what happened, you can never score a fight. You really that effectively. Because if everyone says fighter A won the 5th round decisively, and I'm watching it, and I think fighter B won it, I don't know, do I have the guts to give it to fighter B? Because I'm saying everyone thinks fighter A won it. How can I give it to fighter B? You're already prejudiced, towards scoring it one way. So it's hard once you know what happened.
Jack, it's funny? And the fight that I learned that with was the first Frazier Ali fight, because I went to the fight live. I thought Frazier won. Now, remember, I'm like 12 years old, but I thought Frazier won. I was cheering for Ali. Then about 10 years later, I get the fight on VHS. And by that time, Ali, was doing his whole shenanigans that he won. He landed more punches, yada, yada, yada. I go back and watch it. And in the interim, I became like, I would trade fights and I'd make copies of it for guys. And I would watch it as I was making a copy. And Jack, if you give Ali, now this is after the fact, and if you and I just sat down and watched the fight, you could make a case. It's 8-7 Frazier. But watching it that night, not knowing, and Frazier lands some of those big hooks in the 3rd and 4th rounds, but at the end of the round, and Ali looks like he's hurt and he's shook. I remember that night thinking Frazier definitely won those rounds. But when I went back and watched it, and I knew Ali survived, I start counting punches. Frazier really doesn't get on track until like 2 minutes and 10 seconds into the round. And that showed me then that going back and watching it after you know the result, you just can't be fair. You lose the feel for the fight.
But Jerry Cooney, I like to joke with him in the past, because Jerry liked to say, every time I watch my fight with Larry Holmes, I look better and better. So I said to Jerry, I've been watching your fight with Larry Holmes over and over. And Jerry, every time you've looked better and better, but I'm not going to watch it ever again. I'm done. He goes, why? I said, because if I watch it one more time, you'll actually win. That's how much she's catching up. He loved it. He was cracking up. He loved that talk. But
Jack, there's a guy that had potential that's a shame. We talked about it earlier. Because of so many different reasons, he never reached his potential. But I really do believe, and look, Larry Holmes has said this. You can take that with a grain of salt because it probably makes him look better. But I believe had Cooney, after that fight, not gone off the deep end, stayed active, fought a couple good guys, and had a rematch with Holmes, I think he would have really given him a scare.
Maybe give him a scare, but we'd have to go with
hard
Larry.
To say to beat him because Larry's an all-time great, but I really think had they fought again, Jack, I think Cooney would have benefited a lot. Not win, but it would have been a little different.
Well, we'll never know that, but that's something we could pick up on next show next week on Monday. Okay, it's good to be back on Mondays, Frank.
All right, Jack, so we'll talk about Serrano and Fury next week. Who knows what we'll be talking about then? Can you give us a score on the game?
Yeah, I'm about to 5-1 Arizona in the top of the 9th. Unless the Phillies score at least 4 runs when they get up at this point in the 9th inning. We have a game 7, and Frank.
Jack, would you be surprised if they did that? I wouldn't.
No, they're not, because there'll be a game 7. I'll go with the Phillies in the game 7.
Phillies rock them in game 7.
Anything could happen in game 7. Okay, see you next week, Frank.
Take care, Jack.